All right, welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about dispatch, mainly just kind of what the product is, and then kind of run through what the supporting services are as far as the different microservices that run behind the scenes, the legacy application. Yeah, let's get started. So the first thing I kind of want to hit on was what the product is. Essentially, as you see on screen, it's real-time. It allows dispatchers to track, what orders are, needing to be done in what time frame with what skills or service types, and they can also see the technicians that are available to complete those jobs. And they use the service orders list in order to see the different jobs, time windows, and be able to allocate those orders specifically across those technicians that have the applicable skills. And yeah, that's I guess maybe some applications might be useful. So, for example, a dispatcher of an AC company, an air conditioning company, may have to manage a bunch of technicians that are going around to different people's houses or even businesses to install their air conditioning and do either repair or other services. Maybe they need to upgrade, so on. And so those technicians have different skills, different even efficiencies on how fast they can complete those jobs. And so what dispatch does is allows the dispatcher to see how those different things impact how they can schedule those jobs.
To put it maybe in a different context, so dispatch gets through all the stuff we've already done with appointment and route and everything else, and dispatch is all about managing the day of activities. So to give it an analogy, think of it as you have somebody that's akin to an air traffic controller. It's making sure that planes don't crash. Well, in this case, the dispatcher is making sure that we show up to customers' appointments on time. They're handling any exceptions if the vehicle breaks down, the tech gets injured, making sure that they are promptly responding to that using whatever UI tools we've given them to coordinate getting, again, techs to arrive at the customer's home within the time window. The time window is one of the things that came up actually yesterday with Alejandro Enrigo. It doesn't mean that we have to complete the job within the window. So if we tell a customer we're going to be there between 9 and 11, the way that works is that it means that the technician, WOW or Shaw or Terminix, is promising the customer that they're going to show up somewhere between the hours of 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. to provide whatever service is requested. They may get there at 10:59 and still need to spend another 2 hours, and they're perfectly okay because they've met the customer's time window commitment. It's not ideal. It sucks. It's going to piss the customer off because they waited there for 2 hours, which is why we built things like Status earlier this year to give them visibility into when that technician may arrive. And then the suggestion assist piece that obviously we're talking about and building out in this new version of dispatch is going to start making suggestions, assistance, and at some point automatic recommendations, and just apply them to continually optimize the resource schedules throughout the day.
Yep.
Back to you.
All right. Well, as far as the slide, that's pretty much all I had. Anybody have any questions before I move on? All right. We'll continue talking about the product, but I kind of wanted to go into what all the services are. So, I'm sure a lot of people are tracking Icinga as they should be. So you might see things like app dispatch metrics, alerts go off, or whatever. And so it would help for for IT and support and really everybody to know what those are and what they do. So we'll go ahead and get started with the legacy, which is ESO. So ESO is, here I have it pulled up here. So this is the ESO dispatch. So this is what WOW and Shaw and everybody logs into. And they have a list of service orders. They have their technician list. They also have things such as watch list, which currently is down, so that's great. But normally be able to...
Let me change the Nginx configuration without talking to anybody and repushed it.
but nobody's using the watch list, which is really cool.
So anyway, and they can track things like multiple branches, and I believe that's work that was done within the last couple of years. So this is what a dispatcher would see. They can see that detects schedules as they're lining up. The red jobs are jobs that are at risk, which means they may not be started in the time window, and the different service types and so on. And then, so that's what everything kind of centers around. Obviously when you have a product and you are trying to add on or redo it, you kind of build around it. So everything else that is built that's dispatch specific has been built to support the application and allow us the ability to move away from it easier as we build out the rest of it. So moving on to dispatch microservice, that's used for the back end of dispatch essentially. So things like API calls, for example, get us service orders, are used to keep that information that's going on in dispatch available to our customers essentially. And then it also integrates with things like the Connect APIs, which I can go into further, but allows us to be able to track things like the tech location from LiveMap and so on. And that's essentially the bulk of what the new dispatch is being built under. And then that's related directly to the UI that is being built out, and you guys might have seen it. This is this UI. So this is the new dispatch UI. You can see we have an overview to track the number of jobs and their statuses over the day for a branch or many branches. Things like they're on time versus what we expected them to be. Important metrics like missed jobs or even here, if a tech is in danger, we would see one here. So that's kind of, this is the new UI and what things are leading towards. You can see we can even launch ESO dispatch directly from this application, and as we build this out, this will evolve over time, at different sort of areas of features. And then moving on to rostering. Rostering is also a back-end service, and that handles a lot of the technician schedules and how they flow into dispatch when you are trying to allocate those orders across those technicians' available time. And so rostering is the service that handles pulling that availability and delivering it into dispatch and seeing things like when the shifts end and so on. And then I included also OnPoint Router and the optimization platform. Both of those are, maybe I put them in the wrong order, but the OnPoint Router is a new service that exists to take all of the API traffic and be able to route it, obviously, to the applicable application. So, for example, if we needed to send something to ESO, that an API that we haven't implemented into a new microservice, we may just route it to OnPoint ESO, which the router takes that and posts it to a new location. And same thing for example, dispatch. Maybe there's a call that needs to go to dispatch, and we reroute it to dispatch going through the OnPoint router. And before, that functionality lived within the Nginx load balancer, but it's much more robust as and then onto the optimization platform. So this is actually more used before, but with the suggest and assist, that's part of the process is using the optimization algorithms to get better routing and scheduling, or to have routing and scheduling essentially in real time as orders come in, and as we need to tell dispatchers where they need to move their orders to so they get more efficient service and deliver their service. So that's about everything I had here. Is there any specific points anyone wanted me to elaborate on?
The only piece that I'll add to your slide here, Michael, is there's also, as it ties into this stuff, is the customer endpoint that Amir and them have just been working on adding. And then embedded within the appointment microservice, we're also handling the add and update service orders. And so that one will be making sure that it's getting the orders pushed in and updated into support ESO dispatch. And then OnPoint Router will take care of sending it over to MS Dispatch, and he'll decide if he needs to do anything with it, if it is for today or not for today, for the order that's being modified.
All right. Thank you. And so we will actually move on to more of the demoing side of things. So here I put together, help with Apple Fatma, put together some orders to display here for the branch of Naperville. Right now they're assigned to these various decks. So it might help to, continue on with the analogies or the actual business use application, business use cases rather. It would help if I showed that, maybe from a dispatcher's perspective, they see these schedules and they realize that maybe some of these jobs are not being routed in or scheduled in the most effective way, because maybe we have jobs at risk, or maybe we're overworking them, we don't want overtime, etc. So a dispatcher has the ability to see, maybe this guy's running behind. Maybe I can take his job here and move this to someone else who can maybe get this job done for them. So we're going to move it here, and so that way, for example, this guy, sure, his schedule opens up and would likely have more jobs after. But in the case where a dispatcher needs to get that job done and keep it from missing the time window, we moved this job to this other tech to take it over later in the day. And so to relate that to the services that are serving all this up or maintaining this, this change would apply only within ESO, but then perpetuate through rostering. I guess not necessarily rostering, but through dispatch, and then through the dispatch web dispatch metrics service to see that there are less jobs at risk, so that they don't miss those jobs or get makes customers unhappy. And so, so the mouse is struggling. So that dispatcher, unfortunately, I can't really show it, but the dispatcher may want to watch this guy's schedule because he added more work for this guy and doesn't know if he, may end up running into at-risk issues later on in the day himself as his jobs go through. But you could add him to watch list and pull that up and keep that tracking in real time. Brian, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add.
And look, the schedule board and stuff in here is pretty straightforward. It's not the cleanest interface. The whole point for the dispatch is looking for and managing exceptions. So although there are some challenges with how it was implemented, the things on the bottom are meant to give the dispatcher some view into what could they do, what should they do. In this case, they've got one job that's unassigned, and they have a job that's assigned but presently at risk, is what the green triangle and the red dot tell us. And so that's what should be driving the dispatchers. And if you minimize some of these other pieces here and just show the map, then that's where they could start to look at some of those parts and then go and see where and how that stuff relates. So if you continue and zoom in, you can see, okay, there's the unassigned job. If you wanted, you could overlay the text onto there and start to see, where are their routes? If you go up to view and show all routes. So you guys have some really crazy routes, but that's okay. It makes the point of I can at least see now where the techs are, kind of what areas they're covering. And as a dispatcher, then say, well, crap, I've got a job that's way down there south on 59. Who am I going to get to pick it up and start looking at some of these other routes that are close to it? But that's the problem, right? So we have all these smarts in the system, and we're leaving it all in the hands of the dispatcher. And so if it's their first week, first month, whatever, they're typically not sitting in the area. So you may have dispatchers sitting in Austin, Texas, or Istanbul. They could be dispatching for Chicago, Illinois. You don't have to be in the area. And so that is a big piece for the Suggest and Assist is we have the smarts. We know how far it is from point A to point B. We know what skills the technician has. We know the time window. So that, again, that's the big push for the Suggest and Assist is we can make those recommendations. We know the cost to get that service done. We know what's going to be efficient in terms of timeliness priority, if that's what the customer really cares about. So then the dispatchers have to try to guess at what technician to assign that job to. And they can then focus on higher things like, hey, this technician is starting to run behind, or let me think about who I can assign stuff to based upon the recommendations that are coming out of the Suggest and Assist engine. To all that Suggest and Assist, though, we have to pull the things out of ESO and start to build that replacement because we do not want to touch this Java Swing app or continue to build crap within ESO because it's not maintainable, obviously. The dispatcher's day, I mean, they're constantly just dealing with exceptions. They're not always very proactive. If they are, it's within the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes that they're looking at stuff. Again, tying back to why we have those bucketed pieces broken out on the alert cards is just showing, well, yeah, you may have 200 alerts, but there's only 3 or 4 that are right now that you need to focus on.
All right, thank you. So, unless anyone has any questions, I was going to...
I have a quick question, sorry.
Sure, please.
Looking at this interface, does it mean that we're going to move away from Java dispatch and use other web technologies that are running on all sorts of platforms and devices?
Well, not all sorts of devices. Dispatchers sit in an office. They don't live in the field. But absolutely, everything we can throw away from ESO, the better. That is what we've been doing for the last year and a half, 2 years. Is as we do anything that is new, replacement-wise or other, is continue to throw crap away from ESO.
Cool.
But no, dispatchers don't live there. They will not be dispatching on a mobile phone. It will be on a desktop in a back office. If that's the other part of where you were going.
All right. So the next thing, I just kind of wanted to continue on with, for IT and support especially, they see things like in Isinga, the alerts for these applications. So the main thing was being able to tie these, the alerts that go off to, real things that are, hey, we need to make sure that's working again. So for example, you might see things like check API status for MS Dispatch or, processor status for some of these applications for dispatch metrics, for example, app dispatch metrics, which is what we're looking at now. So for example, if that app were to have issues and you see what is app dispatch metrics, well, this application would not be displaying the way that we want it, and we would need to fix it. Similarly, if things like not having released plans for the day is a issue with the real-time dispatch engine, so that a branch like Calgary, if they didn't have their transitions run, they didn't have a real-time engine for today, they wouldn't be able to open dispatch and wouldn't be able to see, because we wouldn't have the for lack of a better term, engine to compile all those orders and technicians' schedules and how to route them.
It's actually an interesting segue piece. So
This is less on the business front, more on the technical piece, so everybody's aware. So the way that we're setting up the MS Dispatch stuff is, who is it? Laney and Dave worked on stuff back in June, July time period in such a way so that when ESO overnight, what happens is the route's finished. So we're done taking orders. It's somewhere tonight on the 26th. And WOW and Shaw have triggers in the ESO environment based on their business rules. They know when they're done taking appointments. They want to say, cool, we have tomorrow's list of things done. They'll run one final, a lot of feedback. They'll run one final route optimization plan. And when that runs and finishes, it will release it to dispatch, which populates all the information it needs. That then does a push to MS Dispatch, begins the population of all the route metrics that we pull into those database tables. It also, one of the things they also did in MS Dispatch was to handle occasionally Shaw, more so Shaw than WOW, but they may come in at 5 o'clock in the morning and realize 10 techs just called off for whatever reason. Sick, tired, lazy, who knows. And they may have to unrelease and re-release that plan because they've now removed 10 techs and need to redistribute that work. That will also trigger a release to dispatch, and then we'll replace or update whichever rows we already had for that branch plan day. And I know we probably said a couple of times, Michael and myself, I mean, dispatch is only concerned about today. Doesn't care about tomorrow, doesn't care about yesterday, it's only about today.
Well, that's actually everything I had for today. If anybody has any more questions, happy to.
So, one thing with the rostering, I know I'd mentioned the thing where if they release a roster or a text availability for once that day, that's it. They can't update it.
You're talking about adding availability for a tech that's not currently in dispatch into dispatch.
So, you have to bear with me because I have limited visibility. Yeah. If they say this tech is available from here to here, and they go, oh no, I messed up, it's actually from here to here, this will never be entered in.
Sorry, nobody knows what you're in this.
I know. if they're available, yeah, it says initially, the first time it's released, they're available from 9 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
But then somebody comes back and says, oh no, they're actually available from 1 to 4. They only show up as available from 9 to 11. That second update never goes through.
Yeah. ESO dispatch only ever knows about the text availability when that order is released to dispatch. It will also get a notification if you add a brand new technician to the day, but ESO dispatch sucks in its integration with ESO, and it doesn't know about any rostering changes throughout the day for the day. Smott and Dave actually have been working on improving that so that in MS Dispatch, if somebody comes in the morning and goes, well, shit, he's not working 9 to 11, he's working from 9 to 7. They'll make that change available in MS Dispatch.
Perfect. And then the other thing is, when you were, Michael, when you were showing moving a tech at risk via the chart, not the map, I assume that removes optimization unless they're looking at the map.
Oh, yeah. Dispatcher can do whatever they want. To the point they can even go as far as saying, I don't care what skills this tech has, I'm going to override that. That's intentional because they...
What do you think now?
Oh, that's...
No restrictions.
Ooh, I hope they have a motorboat. P.S. that won't work.
So again, the point is the dispatcher has all override capabilities. They know what's going on in the day. They know the tech's skills. They know what they can and do not want to get done. And so the dispatcher can come in and look at it and go, well, I know that tech doesn't have the trouble call skill, but I've talked to a supervisor and they said just assign him to work. He's been making good progress. So dispatcher has all override capabilities to do whatever. We will want to, when we start implementing the dispatch feature stuff into MS Dispatch, we are going to want to give them some type of warning, but we'll also want to do it in a way that we don't present the, standard Microsoft overload of, are you sure you want to save? Are you really, really sure? Because we don't think you're sure you want to save.
Yeah, one thing that Vancouver brought up yesterday was something interesting I hadn't heard of. Let's say they have an escalation or a VIP customer that's like, I'm broken, let's say you're a large commercial customer. One thing they expressed interest is not only being able to override the skills, but if they were to show the nearby techs, to show all techs, even if they're not able to do the work, because they might, have a tech interrupt their job because, if you're a block away, you can get to a very important customer. They might want to send them instead. So that was something interesting that they brought up as something they might want to see eventually.
Yeah, to that point, so as we do the suggest and assist, by default, suggest and assist won't override those settings because we don't want to be the ones held liable for, hey, we made the suggestion to send this tech who doesn't have anywhere close to those skills. What we'll likely do is put something on the screen that allows them to override and ask for additional input. And again, put that back in the hands of the dispatcher to let them see, hey, here's the text that Moby recommends, and then give them some type of an override or equivalent to allow them to see, well, what are the other texts that are also in the area? And then they can make that business determination about sending a tech who's not qualified.
That's super fancy and awesome.
Another question, if I may.
Please.
So I was wondering if a dispatcher looks at the screen and one of the customers calls in and says, like, look, I can't stay home today. I have to leave. So can you reschedule my installation to another date? I assume that the dispatcher can operate the change from this screen.
Nope. They must do that through their billing system. And the reason for that is Moby is not the system of record or the source of truth for that customer's appointment. That is maintained by the external billing system. In the SMB world, if we were to build out SMB appointment, then Moby would be the source of truth. SMB dispatch, we would be the source of truth. There's nobody else that's managing and maintaining that order. But for a big customer like Shaw and Wow, that appointment date, Terminex, the same thing. That appointment date is set and held within Mission. And if any point we get an update, by God, that appointment date is updated because that's what we've been told the new date is that's been promised to the customer. We do not have, nor do we want to, build hooks back into the 1,800 different possible billing system connections out there in the world. Because those guys, we had to do those historically, and everyone had a different format to take the job updates, completions, whatever else, and they changed them on a sometimes bi-monthly basis, and you had to pay to get recertified. So, no. They must go to their billing system because the billing system is the source of truth for the appointment date.
Well, actually, what I was wondering is what happened with the plan for today in ESO, and what happens. I don't know. Maybe one of the techs knows that he has to drive to a certain address at a certain hour, and if the customer calls in and says, like, look, I'm not going to be home, I assume that the dispatcher would have to change something so that the tech guy knows.
So,
and when this change is operated, what happens in the back? Like,
so that would actually, yeah, generally speaking, that never even goes to the dispatcher. That goes to the call center. The call center, so it's a different group of people that are doing dispatch than are taking your calls to say, hey, my modem is out, or I need new internet service. So two different classes of folks, or groups of people, I should say, within a company's organization. The call center rep would take that request, and they would reschedule it. And at that point, it comes into ESO. ESO takes that order off of today, and then the tech no longer has it on their handheld. It's gone. Dispatcher's not involved with that at all, nor do you want them to be, because that's not a good use of their time. They don't generally interact with customers unless they have to for things like, I know this tech is going to be late. Will you please forgive me, Mr. Customer, for being late? They don't generally deal with customers saying, hey, I'm not going to be home today at 3 p.m. Can you reschedule me? That goes to the call center.
That's
And
cool.
I guess the
Thanks for explaining.
just to verify that I understand it correctly, it goes to the call center, and the call center uses some sort of system, which typically is an external system that manages these appointments. And when the date changes, they have these bindings written to our APIs, and they usually automatically send an API request.
Yeah, they'll send, in that case, Jen, what they'll do is we'll get an add service order request, which will flow through the system, and that add service order request, well, first thing they'll do is customer will say, hey, I can't make that day, can I come, when can you come next, or I need you to come on this day. They'll then, within their system of record, go through the appointment scheduling process. So they'll make a get available appointments call, and whether that's locked to a certain day or not, I mean, that's all business process driven, but they'll first end up calling get available appointments. The call center rep will negotiate one of those appointments with the customer. Once they've locked in on that date and time they like, then their next step is to do a add service order request. And that all happens automatically. I mean, that's part of the integration, why enterprise customers take so much longer to set up, is because there's such heavy integration to support appointment and dispatch. And so obviously then when that comes in, it goes through, you think about the first couple of slides Michael has, the add service orders request is first going to come in, hit Nginx. Nginx will send them to the OnPoint router. OnPoint router has logic to know, all right, well, hey, can I send this to ESO? Can I send it to the service order, or sorry, the appointment microservice? So he knows kind of what he needs to do and how to route request. After he's done dealing with the routing, he'll look into flags that say, do I need to send this on to dispatch, whatever else, and has a job that's looking through all of these messages that have come through the system and go, oh yeah, add service orders request. He had the notify dispatch flag. So I'm going to send that add service order request on over to MS Dispatch. MS Dispatch then needs to look at that and make the determination of, does that order impact today? And that determination of if it impacts today is you have to look at, was the order already on today and now it's no longer, i.e. a reschedule? Or is that order not in today's master plan at all and now it's being added? So we have to look for both the additions and the subtractions to support the same day adds and the reschedules.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody else?
Do we want to bring up that that diagram that shows what Brian was just talking about?
Dispatch is finally going to be where we wanted it to be about 10 years ago. When by the time we get all said and done with this, it'll be really nice. And I was thinking about it this morning and counting back. This, I think, is actually our... And I wasn't around for some of them.
It was, I think this is like our 10th iteration that I've been around for.
So go into API microservices and down to, no, not there. Go to, where is it? Yeah, OnPoint router. I just click on that main page there and
You
click on
updated
that
it.
diagram.
Oh, I remember this.
Yeah, so this diagram is just kind of showing the interactions Brian was describing. We probably should have just brought it up while he was talking about it, but it's kind of annotated there as well to kind of show some of the interactions. I've got to do a bit more documentation and drill in on the dispatch microservice and its interactions with the dispatch app to show some more detail there, but this basically gives that high level how Nginx and OnPoint router are intercepting basically all of the ESO traffic. And as we've been rewriting certain APIs, certain appointment APIs, customer APIs, some calendar APIs, stuff like that, we've been intercepting them with OnPoint router and forwarding them on to the new locations where they're rewritten. One of the cool things, cool side benefits here, because we're doing this interception, we're shoving all messages, all request response pairs into this OnPoint proxy database. And so we'll be able to track and audit basically everything that's flowing through the system and know who's calling what and where, and have a audit log of it that's easily accessible. What else can I say here? There's kind of blue lines and black lines on the picture. The blue lines represent notifications that are being sent. So we've got ESO notifying OnPoint router that line is representing it's called dispatch notifications. So if somebody makes a change somewhere, then things are like a change story somewhere in the legacy dispatch app, then those changes get sent to OnPoint router, because OnPoint router wants to be able to notify various people of those changes. Rostering as well has a blue line there coming out of it, and it's basically monitoring for any calendaring changes that get made within the ESO system. And if any changes are detected, it fires a message to dispatch, so dispatch can update itself and re-optimize the plan based on any calendar changes, schedule changes. And then basically, yeah, like Brian was mentioning, OnPoint router has some logic in there to determine if it should be sending certain messages that come through the system, if it should also be updating dispatch about those messages. So for example, let's say a same day appointment scheduling request comes through and we end up adding a new service order to the system. Well, dispatch is going to want to know about that so it can update its plan. So those types of events all get handled through that one main routing mechanism, OnPoint router.
And just as a note here, in MS Dispatch, what we get from the XML API is called like a request, like a add service order request or update service order request. Well, it is actually like a event because it already happened. It already happened in the customer's system of record. We're just getting a notification about it.
Yeah.
I have one question. The optimization platform, specifically in which scenarios we're calling it?
Anytime we're doing something to affect, so right now that's part of what I think you and Landy have been working on over the last couple of days, or at least setting up the framework for it. So the optimization platform gets called when we release the plan to dispatch. Somewhere after that point, and the fact that the clock is turned on branch local time to midnight, so current day, we'll make a call to the optimization engine to set up the real-time engine. The real-time engine keeps track of, hey, where are all the jobs? Are we being optimized? You know, what's the current state of them? So it's the one that's going to help provide the feedback for Suggest and Assist. To do that, he needs to be updated on just about everything that comes into the system. So job gets rescheduled out of the day, got to let the engine know. Text availability changes, got to let the engine know. Job gets completed, canceled, not done, need to let the engine know. Somebody in ESO dispatch performs an action such as I move job 1 from tech A to tech B. That comes from ESO to OnPoint router. OnPoint router will pass it over in a dispatch notification saying that I've got a schedule update. That's got to go to the OP. So just about everything that's coming into the system along those lines, in addition to even on-job actions, those all have to go to the OP.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the pieces Keith mentioned this, but I just want to make sure that specifically the support and services team are aware is that when Keith said we're saving all of the request responses that come into ESO, today, if you guys wanted to look at the XML API logs, you'd have to guess which one of the 4 ESO nodes the API traffic went to. There's 10 nodes in production, but through Nginx, we limit the API traffic to nodes 1 through 4, UI traffic to nodes 7 through 10. So it makes it a little bit of a hunting game. With what we've done there and needing to be able to queue this stuff, in the OnPoint proxy database for 14 days, after the requests and responses are generated, the full XML details will be stored in an archive table We'll keep the response times and the response status probably for a year so we can see what the trends are, how many calls by customer, by request type, and again, just kind of what those response times are. But you won't have to continue to go to the 15 or 20 different places to look at the logs for that stuff. So you can look at one place and see those requests and responses. And I guess the other piece, I mean, we said this dispatch is only for same day. So somewhere shortly after midnight, there is a stored procedure job that's going to run, and he is going to remove everything from the current dispatch tables that's not for today's plan date and move them into an archive table set. Haven't decided how long we'll keep things there yet or what level of roll-ups we're going to do, but we're going to keep the actual dispatch tables themselves, plan service order, plan resource, plan metrics, change event, whatever, to be tied very specifically to just today's plan date. So we have a small, thin working set. We don't end up with millions of rows in there. I say millions because as you think about Shaw, they've got 1,800 and 2,000 techs. Those techs on average do anywhere between 6 to 10 jobs a day based upon the type of work they do. WOW does similar. And in that same regard, we're trying to also work on Terminix to convince them that they should be using dispatch as well because they really care about on-time arrival. And they've got about 6,000 techs that are doing between 15 and 20 jobs a day.
I think that's about it, unless anybody has any more questions.
The only thing I'll add, just to make sure everyone is aware, is that as we're doing this new dispatch stuff, we have a new dispatch database. So all ESO dispatch is right into the core database, which tenant specific. And so as we're doing this new stuff, we're shoving all the new dispatch into a prod dispatch database that is not tenant.
Yeah, that's a good point. Keith, you may want to talk technically on eliminating more calls to core or not. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. I can say something briefly about it. But basically, just like Daniel said there, we are going to be eliminating the tables that the legacy dispatch application is using in that legacy core database. And yeah, instead sort of marshaling all that data over to this new dispatch database so that the dispatch microservice can have control and own its own data set. Kind of just good microservice design architecture. We are also making it multi-tenant so that we don't have to have a new database spun up every time there's a new tenant that gets added. Keep this solution a lot simpler. And given that, I guess just kind of sharing this information out, the goal here is to have the dispatch microservice be the source of truth for dispatch related information. And so what we don't want to do is have the dispatch microservice going off to say to the core database or going off to Datamart or going off to whatever random database to look up information. Instead, it should be either asking its own database that it owns, or it should be going through another microservice to go and look up information. So for example, dispatch would own information about, hey, is this particular technician in danger right now? Or what's this particular service order's dispatch state right now? It would own that information, but it wouldn't own information about, say, that particular technician's daily schedule. That is owned by the rostering microservice. So if the dispatch microservice is interested in, finding out about a particular technician's calendar or schedule updates, well, he's going to call off to rostering, and rostering will go off to wherever it needs to go to find that information. Right now it's the core database. Ultimately, eventually, as we keep moving through pulling pieces of ESO out and rebuilding them and creating a microservice architecture, what you want to do is you want to have each microservice have its own database and have its own source of truth. And then that eliminates the ability to have microservices stepping on each other's toes. So, I mean, right now there's nothing technically preventing us in customer microservice from just reaching over and into some tables that rostering should otherwise own. And you sort of the main downside of that is you end up rewriting code over and over again in one microservice or another one. You end up taking these little shortcuts to say, well, I can just go grab this data from this database because it's easy to do. But yeah, you kind of end up, like I say, re-implementing code. Maybe you implement that code differently in one place versus another place. Then you find out 6 months later that you coded a bug and you've got to go and make a change to a query or something like that. Now all of a sudden, instead of changing a query in one place and having it fix that bug in all the places, now you've got to go to each microservice everywhere that touches that one table in that same way, and you've got to change that where clause or whatever and redeploy everything. And ultimately, we're trying to get away from that. We want to have better reusability of code and have sources of truth that we can go to and depend on. And yeah, so this is high level.
Definitely.
That's kind of the goal. Anyways, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely. I mean, we want to be done with ESO sooner than later. So, you guys are fine those things. Let's bring them up to Keith, myself, whoever. To let's say, hey, I just found that we're making a call to core here, and let's replace that. Let's figure out what the right service, microservice is. How do we do that so that as we continue to replace things in ESO, like at some point it'll be fairly simple because rostering you'll have a defined endpoint. And we can just start swapping out and moving those calls to hit a rostering database as opposed to hitting ESO all the time. When things need to make the calls, we don't have to go and change every app. We just need to retool parts of the rostering application. Mm-hmm. We may have to change some APIs here and there, but the less we can do about that, and it'll make our lives a hell of a lot easier because, as we all know, ESO is a very convoluted mess.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you, everybody, for hopping on here. And if you have any more questions, feel free to message me or ask me directly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for the session. We should do this more often.